I'm doing well, man. I really appreciate you having me back on.
You know
I
what I just I'm sorry, man. You know what I just noticed is my audio wasn't even going. I just
oh,
did my
okay.
whole spiel.
It's okay. Let's just take one. That's all good.
Take one. I did my whole spiel, and your audio and my audio wasn't even on. So let me do it really quick one more time. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to mattnews.biz, the podcast where I share and discuss contrary thoughts, opinions, and beliefs that have been lovingly dubbed Matt News. Like I said in my first time go around, it's not necessarily controversial or anything like that. Just sometimes because it's contrarian. It's not the norm. So this episode is brought to you unofficially by Restream. Restream is the best way to live stream to YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and 30 plus streaming sites all at once. You can expand your audience with multi-streaming today at restream.io. Please feel free to interact with me and my guests during tonight's live stream, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or even Twitch. You can comment in the chat section below. I'm going to see that, and we'll take a little bit of time at the end of the show to respond. Now, tonight I have John the Messenger. He is back, and we're going to discuss more Tik Tok Shenanigans and even Jesus. Now, John, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Matt. I really appreciate you having me back on. I've said before, even when I've spoke places, that having someone once is okay. If they have you back, that you did something right the first time. So I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So like I was telling you earlier, like I'm doing a whole lot of new things. I'm trying to, with my stream and everything like that, just to make production value go up a little bit. My wife bought me this brand new podcast microphone for
Looks great.
Christmas. And so I was like, I've got to up my game.
Yeah, sure. Got to evolve.
Yeah, man. So I'm probably going to rehash a lot of stuff we talked about last time because, last time I was having so many issues with my audio
Sure.
and stuff like that. And it was just, it became unsalvageable. Like the more I messed with it, the more I was like, this is just too much. Um, and so we're going to rehash a little bit, but then I also just want to talk about some different stuff too.
Sure.
So, so if I could talk a little bit about TikTok, why you started your TikTok.
Yeah. So I think like most people around my age, so I'm 33, I'll be 34 soon. It was during quarantine, kind of the first initial stretch of quarantine that we thought was only going to last like a month, and we're coming up on like 10 months now. But I think a lot of us were spending a lot more time on our phones than usual. And I had seen things here and there about TikTok, seen some videos, and I think I came across a couple like compilations and stuff on YouTube. And so I just wanted to check it out. And something that I had really gotten into doing was on Instagram. I loved doing the stories on Instagram. Like I would post normal stuff, but I loved doing the stories and interacting with people that way. And I realized that TikTok was just kind of a more advanced version of that. And so that's really why I got into it. I was like, hey, I enjoy entertaining people, and if this could be a kind of a if this could be a way to get in touch with people and even kind of show people Jesus too, then I think there's a unique way to be able to do that. So that was kind of the initial start of all of that.
Cool, man. Cool. Yeah. So I know you do like a lot of trends and stuff like that. And do you find that you like that more than you do, um, not engaging with people, but engaging with some more controversial issues?
Yeah, I think I like the silly stuff. I think that's why I was drawn to TikTok, was that I think in that way it's very kind of youth ministry, where like I really enjoy the silly stuff and I enjoy kind of the funny stuff, but I think there's room in there to also talk about some more serious things. And so for me, it's being able to build some rapport with people, so that if I do bring something that might be a little bit more controversial, then people are willing to hear that. Um, I think social media in general is an interesting place to discuss controversial things, um, because it gives you the power to kind of put things out there, and you are able to, I don't know if you can control the narrative, but you can control what you respond to and all of that. So,
Yeah.
so I've done that. I've done that a little bit. I've kind of made the choice to stay away from some of those things because I think there are some things for non-believers. If they hear people engaging in that, I think it kind of scares them away. And so, not that I want to shy away from anything, but especially there's a huge, and I'm sure that you've seen it. There's a huge section of like quote unquote Christian TikTok that is like super deep theology, and I like that stuff that I can get into here and there, but sometimes I think it's too deep for people to, for people kind of on the fringe to really embrace. So I try to be careful with what I put out there.
Yeah. Yeah, because lately I've actually noticed that there's a lot of it might be just my algorithm is what my algorithm is picking up and about that. But it seems like there's a lot of infighting between Christians, and then
Yeah,
there's also a lot of people that are just straight up just either like total they present themselves as if they're like, "Hey, I want to ask like a serious question," but really they're just like dogging Christianity.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you find yourself responding to any of those?
Um, I mean, the the one that jumps to mind is I love finding videos that people do where, like you said, it's non-believers that are asking questions
Hmm.
of about to Christians. And the one girl said, she like slipped a question in there about, do you do you wear clothes that are mixed fabrics, which is like an allusion to Leviticus, where it talks about that. And so I thought that was hilarious
Yeah.
because a lot of the responses that I saw, people didn't really pick up on that. So that there are some things like that. One thing that I've really found is that the response to people, I think, sometimes can be just as powerful, if not more powerful, than what you say initially, right? So like I just did a stitch with a guy that was just kind of talking some crazy stuff about he coming from the kind of progressive Christianity movement. Um, and I know that whenever I touch on any of those types of things, people aren't there are going to be people that that come after that, that aren't happy about that. And what I've realized is that if you can respond in a way that isn't jumping down people's throats, um, I think that's super helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that that really does help. I don't know if saying help the cause is the right thing to say, but I do think that it opens up more of an honest conversation, because a lot of times when people enter those comment sections on whatever social media it is, they're just assuming people are going to fight with them. They're assuming that people are going to call them stupid, and all of that. So, anytime I do put things out there like that, I try to respond in a way that is going to be helpful. And it's pretty easy to pick up on too. Like I had a guy that quoted, he posted something and it was in all caps and it was just all of this. And so I just responded like, hey, like I think your caps lock is broken. Like I'm just I'm just not, it really just saying I'm not even gonna engage in this, because if it's purely from a stance of I just want to start a fight, I just want to get you riled up, then um, I'm either not interested in that, or I know that that's a place where I could do more damage than good. So I just try to leave that alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I asked you this last time, but how do you choose like the content that you're going to create? Like, how do you go about that?
Um, really, it's funny that there have been times where I've really gotten kind of caught up in the numbers and wanting to put stuff out that, like I want to get a bunch of likes, and um, that stuff usually bombs. And honestly, the stuff that is done best is just literally like turning on my camera and saying what I'm thinking. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much been it. And so I'm trying to be more free with that. I do love, like, I love finding audios on there and finding a fun way to use them. But like, yeah, it really is. It's either just kind of weird stuff that I'm thinking about, or stuff, the stuff that I post about my faith really is just stuff that I'm experiencing and stuff that I'm thinking about. So very rarely am I getting on and saying like, this is what people need to hear. It's really more like, this is what I'm realizing right now, and I'm sure that there are other people that are going through this. So, I try to with the fun stuff or the silly stuff, it's really just stuff that I think is funny that makes me laugh.
Yeah.
And the more serious stuff is kind of similar, like just stuff that I think is important, stuff that I've learned, and just trying to help people along that way.
Yeah, yeah. I actually just got on the acting trends. I know you like
Yeah.
some of my videos, um, and I even did the I think it's the most recent one I did was with the guy. He's like speaking Italian and he's giving like a gnocchi
Oh
recipe,
yeah. Okay.
and it was just so funny because the girl. All I did was I ran past this video and this girl was just like staring at this guy while he was making like he's doing all this stuff, and so I was like, it'd be funny if she was like writing really fast, you know.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah. That's great.
so then I was just like, yeah, I'll go make that video.
That's funny. Yeah, that's good. And I think again, I think that's the fun thing, and that's one of the unique things with that platform is you can see something that someone else is doing, and that kind of sparks something. And I try to be really careful too because I've also seen where people are just like straight up stealing content.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, that's funny, I'm just going to do that. And so I try not to do that, but yeah, being able to the way that you're able to interact, whether you're duetting or stitching or whatever with other people on there, I think is really cool. And those acting things I think are so funny. I've done a couple of those, and I just think again those are the ones that are just for me. I just think they're funny.
yeah,
But yeah, it's a unique platform for sure.
yeah, yeah. It definitely is, and it's funny because you said you would do those because you think they're funny. That's the only reason I did them, and then I had people message me and like, hey man, that was really funny the other day when you did that,
Yeah,
and it's the only time that people have messaged me.
that's awesome. That's great.
um talking about your faith a little bit, I didn't ask you this last time, and like I kind of beat myself up that I didn't ask you, but or did I ask you? So how did you come to know Jesus?
Yeah. So the short version that I give kind of at the outset is that I accepted Christ whenever I was 5. I really started to understand what that meant around 13, and I really started to live that out when I was 20. And so I grew up in the church and went to all the children's programs. Was super involved in youth group, to the point that was really kind of probably in an unhealthy way was kind of my identity was there. That's where I felt kind of the most freedom to be myself, and so that's really what I dove into. By the end of youth group, like my senior year, I was planning the retreat. I was doing all this stuff, but very much was like doing one thing in church and something completely different in school. Not that I was like out partying or anything crazy, but I something, and I've kind of been going through this even on my TikTok, is like something that I'm starting to come to grips with is just my own insecurities, which is really what drove me through high school. And so it was very much like trying to make people laugh, just trying to fit in. Went away to college, was not ready for that at all, and was there for 2 years, and left there. And it was during that time that I really started to look at my faith and go, okay, if this is real, then what is this supposed to look like?
Mm,
And one of the most important things that I had that I really think started to form my ministry was I started to think about if you asked someone within the church and someone outside the church what a Christian looked like, just physically, like what does a Christian look like, you would probably get the same answer. Like
yeah,
someone inside the church and outside the church would probably describe a fairly similar person. And I just thought that's not good. Like that's not right. And so I kind of made it my mission to go, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to live my faith, but not in a way that people go, oh yeah, that's like that, just stereotypical whatever.
right.
um and so yeah, so 20 was really where I kind of started to live things out. There was a summer, I worked at a summer camp for a bunch of years. There was a specific week there that really just kind of flipped things around for me. And yeah, and that's kind of where things started. And I've kind of been on that journey ever since.
Yeah. So what are you doing right now in ministry?
So right now, I worked I've kind of been all over the place in terms of ministry. The last real ministerial job that I had was I was a Bible teacher at a local Christian school. That that closed down kind of unexpectedly a couple years ago, and really since then it's been figuring out what the next thing is. So I'm an elder in my church. I've taught Sunday school, helped with youth group, all of that kind of stuff. I really enjoy going out and speaking for retreats and schools and camps, and so trying to do as much of that as I can. And so just really right now it's figuring out what the next step is. I'm working a job right now that is a job, which is pretty much it. And so we're trying to figure out really what the next big step for us is, and just trying to, yeah, I take my position as an elder really seriously, and I'm enjoying that and teaching where I can, and honestly, the TikTok stuff has been, um, I don't want to say it's been a huge focus of mine, but it's definitely something I'm seeing like, oh, I think I actually do have something to bring to this, and
Yeah.
I've been able to interact with people in a really cool way. So that's kind of where I'm at with all of that right now.
Yeah. What kind of connections have you made in TikTok? Like, are there any kind of like, because you know, like I don't know if you would consider us a deeper connection, but it kind of is and isn't. But have you connected with somebody on TikTok that you feel like, man, I'm really ministering to this person, or vice
Um,
versa?
yeah, I think a little bit of both. I've connected with some guys that are, um, I don't know for sure, but I think are a good bit younger than I am, that are really like really deep in like reformed theology,
Yeah.
which has been really cool. Like, because I'm in the PCA Presbyterian Church in America, which is pretty conservative, but I'm not an academic. That's not something that I'm like reading tons of books about it and whatever. So that's been really cool. And then yeah, I've been able to connect with guys kind of around my age, or people I guess around my age, that just are similar, like are really wanting to grow their faith and kind of get things out there creatively, but also kind of doing some of the silly stuff. Um and but it's crazy because I think I've been on there for 7 or 8 months now, and it's crazy that there are people on there that I know that, if I was in a really bad way, that I know that I could reach out to them. And and
Mm,
these are people that I've never seen face to face. I've never really had like a full conversation with, but ha- have been able to we've kind of been able to form this little community on there. And so it's kind of nuts, like whenever I step back and I'm like, every once in a while I'm like, oh, is this weird? Like, I don't know. um but they're just some really genuine people on there, and I think that I think as Christians, I think that's really important, to
yeah.
find people that really are just genuine, that it's not just a show, but are willing to put themselves out there and say this, especially on social media, like, I'm not just going to put the best of me out there, but
Mm,
also these are the things that I'm dealing with. That this today wasn't a good day, whatever. So yeah, and again, to have people, even if it's just a one time thing, but especially with the faith based stuff, I had a guy say on there a couple of days ago, like, oh, like I've always thought about this, but I've never been able to explain it the right
mm,
way. Like, I've never been able to put it into words. Like, this made so much sense. And it's stuff like that I'm like, yeah, cool. Like,
yeah.
that's awesome. So that, I think those are the things that I really enjoy about it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So a video that I recently saw of yours that really it inspired me, man. Was your Apostles' Creed?
Hmm.
Like every day you did a piece of the Apostles' Creed. What made
Yeah.
you think of that one?
You know what? That was just something that, I was thinking about a conversation that I had with my mom one time, and we were talking about the Apostles' Creed, and she just kind of said, like, she said, I think that's so great because if someone were to ask you what you believe, it really does encompass all of that. And so
Mhm.
you wouldn't have to necessarily recite it word for word, but it's a good kind of guideline. And so I was actually out hunting a couple weeks ago, and I just thought, it would be really cool to be able to get that out there, but like with a lot of things on there, I'm like, how could I do this in a way that is different? That, that it's not just because I know for me, like if I got on there and it was just someone reciting the Apostles' Creed,
Yeah.
I may or may not sit for that whole thing.
Yeah.
My attention span is not even a minute long on there. So, so I thought, well, what if I was able to break it up and do it? And so I thought, okay, I'll do one part each day. And it really just kind of started as a like, yeah, this might be something cool to do. But what I realized was it was something that I was consistently thinking about, like,
Mm.
and so it became this thing that was like, yes, this is kind of a creative project that I'm doing, but it's also forcing me to just think through these things. And so I was like, yeah, so I need to do this today. This is the part that I'm on. And then also as I'm going through it, I'm listening to the whole thing, whatever I had done up until that point. So that was something for me that was like, huh, like just for me personally, I thought this is cool. Like I'm enjoying this. So I think it's something that I want to continue doing. The funny part about that is that, it ends up being like a maybe maybe every week
Yeah.
video or every other week. So it's not something that's like, yeah, I'm going to do one of these every day.
Yeah.
But I actually, a guy commented, I asked if people had any recommendations, and a guy mentioned Psalm 23. And so I was
Mm.
like, cool. Yeah. So I started that one today, and it'll probably, I haven't really counted it out, but I'm guessing it'll probably be a couple weeks. Um, but I think the other thing with that is that it seems so simple. Like, and I think that's where I get tripped up sometimes, is that I think I needed to come up with something really elaborate. I need to
Yeah.
keep up with whatever. And again, it's like just speaking simple truths to people, or things that I would consider simple because it's
Hmm.
something that I grew up with, or something that whatever that it, not everyone has had that experience. And
Right.
so just to be able to put that out there, and not with any, not with any like glitz and glamour of it, but just to be able to state it, I think that's a powerful thing too. So
Yeah.
yeah, and there's been good reaction to that. It's been really cool to see people interacting with that.
Yeah. Have you ever had an idea that you didn't do because you thought, man, this is either gonna like create a lot of controversy, or man, like I just don't want to take the heat from atheists.
Yeah. There have been a couple, I would say there have probably been a couple comments that I've had on videos that like initially I was like, oh yeah, like I'm definitely going to respond to this with a video, whatever. Um, but also, but recognizing like either, like you said, it's just not worth it. Like
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to go anywhere, or um, I'm not going to be able to say this in a way that is helpful.
Yeah.
It's really just going to be me going, "You're stupid," and and that's just not going to help any. So, and I'm sure I can't think of any specific, but I'm sure have even been videos that I've made that I'm like, no, this just isn't, this isn't going to be good. And I did. And I've had people message me too. I last time I was on, we talked about this a little bit, but whenever there have been a couple things that I've posted about just about worship
Yeah.
on there that, I had some people message me about, uh, and they were good conversations, but they're again, a place that I've definitely grown is understanding when that it is okay to, and when I should just say, you know what, I appreciate the conversation. I'm going to be done now. Like
Yeah.
I'm just going to kind of step away, because you can recognize pretty early on if someone is just going to continue with something like I'm going to convince you of this, and I'm happy to have the conversation, and I'm happy to kind of state my side, and ask questions of them, but very rarely am I ever going into a situation going, I'm gonna I'm gonna convince them otherwise. So if people approach me with that, I'm happy to have the conversation, but I'm careful with that too, because I do kind of want to guard myself against anything that that really that's going to push people away, or that's not going to be helpful for people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Do you find um because you don't you're kind of got it kind of post. I feel like your videos are for everybody. You know, like your videos really don't start controversy around that. It's really just you sharing your faith.
Sure.
Um, but do you find yourself? I just started following this girl on TikTok, and she's like openly Calvinist and with that. And I saw that you commented on one of her videos. She would stitch it with the Wadester, and it was about
Oh yeah,
yeah, it was about the sovereignty of God,
yeah.
and and uh, do you find yourself, if at all, at odds with other Christians on that app, you know, in that kind of regard,
Um,
theologically, like different
yeah,
theological?
yeah. I think there are definitely people that I disagree with.
Yeah.
Again, it's a thing where that that type of platform is made for. I mean, it's made to just either just throw shade at in every direction or just go at people's throats,
Yeah.
and so I do find myself getting caught up in that and going, oh, I have to, I have to say something about this. Something that I'm realizing, and what something that TikTok has really opened my eyes to is like, there are way like the issues that I would have considered major at one point. I'm like, okay, at no point am I at no point am I going, well, I don't know that you're saved because this is what you believe.
Hmm.
Like, there's a lot out there that I'm going, whoa, like,
Yeah.
geez, and so it's really opened my eyes to that. So guys like Wade, like it, I don't really agree with the stuff that he says.
Hmm.
Um, but I would also say, uh, you know, there's a lot, and I don't want to go just at him, but there's a lot
Yeah.
of people on there that sometimes it's not even so much what they say, but I guess the arrogance with which they say it. So like phrasing things in a way that's like, if you don't agree with this,
You're a
I'm
false
questioning
teacher.
yourself. Yeah, like
Yeah.
yeah, um, and I would say even people that I agree with
Yeah.
theologically, I'm going like, whoa, let's not, and I have seen a couple guys that have really have put stuff out there to say like, hey, let's not do that anymore. Like,
Hmm.
let's understand that at the end of the day, we may disagree, but we are brothers and sisters in Christ, and
Hmm.
um, so yeah, there's definitely some things that I come across, and I also have to check with myself too of like, is this just something that I don't like personally, or do I think that this is? And so I'll tell you right now, and I might do a video on this at some point, like the whole like, stop scrolling, let me pray for you thing. I'm just like, there's something within me that just doesn't sit well, and I don't know what that is. I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's just like, oh, that seems like super insincere to me,
Yeah.
because you don't, whatever. So there are things like that, and certain, I would say, even kind of trends within Christian TikTok that I'm like, it remind and you have this with any kind of Christian trend. It reminds me of like the Christian t-shirts in the 90s that
Oh
was
yeah.
like, oh no, don't, no, that's
I
not it.
I used to have
Um,
some of those, man. I used to have the Jesus is my homeboy T-shirt.
yeah. Well, and I'm thinking of the, like, the Reese's cups that was like Jesus,
Oh yeah.
like that kind of, so there are things within it but again, I think that's where you go, okay, I don't want to be that.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be someone, and you said like, I do kind of try to make videos for everyone. I kind of joke around because there are some videos that have really blown up for me that were like dad related. They weren't, faith based at all. And so it's funny to me, I can see sometimes that I'll get a bunch of followers from a post, that has nothing to do with my faith, and then I'll put a couple out that, that are, and while I'm gaining followers, I'm also seeing that there are people that I'm losing too.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, I kind of take pride in going, yes, I'm like, yes, my faith is the most important thing to me, but it's not the subject of everything that I'm doing. So like,
Right.
the phrase that I started using is that that Jesus is at the center of everything that I'm doing, but he's not the subject of everything that I'm doing. And so, in my mind, I want it to have the same feel as like just have, when I have conversations with people. When I have conversations with people, it's not all about my faith. Like that will probably come up at some point, but yeah, it's not something that I'm like, uh, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say. I think that's the advantage of the platform, is that people can figure out how they want to do that.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not all God all the time. For other people, it is, and that's awesome. There are people that I follow that I'm just like, this is incredible. The
Yeah.
stuff that you're putting out is just really, really good. And so, but I want people to be able to see that we are different.
Mhm.
That Christians are different, and so one person might be doing one thing, one person might be doing another, but at the end of the day, if you know I have to be careful how I even say this because it can get twisted around, but if the God of the Bible is the center of what we're doing, then
Mhm.
we can we can come together on that. So
Yeah.
um so that's kind of the thought behind really all the stuff that I post. Is I want to bring people in a way that if I do, if and when I do bring up my faith, it's not going to be something that they're like, what? No, I don't, because I have the other stuff too. And so if I can bring people into that conversation, and I've seen that a little bit with people that I know aren't believers that have liked or interacted with some of those faith-based videos. And at the end of the day, if I can bring someone into that would not have been brought into that otherwise, then that's a win for me. So um yeah, so that's kind of the thought behind all of that.
That's cool. I like that. I like the way you put that. Like Jesus is at the center, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the subject of everything that you put out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's a huge misconception that a lot of people have, is that if Jesus is at the center, then he's going to be the subject of everything that
Right.
you're gonna put out. But that's not that's not necessarily true. And I thought that was very well put. Um, so trying to think of, I had a question formulated and then it kind of went away. um, you were talking about like major issues and then like minor issues and stuff that you have to think about, like, well, that's just kind of me. Um, what uh, what kind of minor issues do you find are problem areas for you to like, I got to stay out of this conversation because this is a minor thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a lot that is, worship is something that I'm passionate about. And so I think there are some things within that at the end of the day are minor, but I think have the potential to be real issues within the church. And so I would say that for sure is a big one. Um, and being ones that I come across often are being Presbyterian, getting into the whole like baptizing infants. It's like that's what we do, and I think that there's I think there's like the best biblical case for that. But again, it's not like if people are believers baptism, that's not necessarily something I'm going to be like, I can't believe you,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So worship is probably the biggest one because I think that's one that I'm most passionate about, and something that um, really affects every church. Every church has a pretty strong stance on worship, whether they realize it or not. And so that's one that I love talking about, and I really enjoy those conversations. But I also I think I have to be careful in the way that I phrase things, because sometimes it comes off as like, I know that sometimes it comes off as like, well, you're just selfish. Like
Yeah.
the way that you worship is selfish, and that's not necessarily, not even necessarily what I think. But I know that it can come across that way sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, I deal with the same issues sometimes too. Because um, I've told you this before, but like the church I currently work for and attend is a very charismatic church.
Yeah.
And so I did not come from a charismatic tradition. I was saved when I was 17, um, but I was saved in a Baptist church, and they are not charismatic
No.
by any means. But the church I was at, the Baptist church I was at, was very open to charismatic uh, movements and things like that. Um, but so for me, it's more. I've seen people be charismatic, fall away like really fast, like fall away from the
Yeah.
church. And so for me, sometimes I'm like, because I'm not charismatic, you know, I question the genuineness of it, you
Sure.
know, and then and then I have to go back and say, well, I just because I don't necessarily operate that way doesn't mean that they aren't. Doesn't mean that they aren't operating
Yeah.
in that.
Well, and I think the important part of that conversation too is understanding that, like being in a more conservative church, like we have a worship band and stuff, but even being in a more conservative church, that me saying that I think that that's a better way to go isn't saying that everyone in my church worships the right way,
Right.
and so there's no church that you're going to find that everyone is 100% doing it the right way and for the right reasons. I think you can find, you know you can find things within um any form of worship, or however your church worships, that probably doesn't work well, or can lead to something that isn't good, or a mindset that isn't good. So that's another thing too, and typically if people are having those conversations about worship, it's something that they're passionate about and something that they're closely tied to. And so it's really easy to take things it's really easy to take things the wrong way, or to be maybe even be too invested in that. So even with the charismatic thing, like that's not me sitting here and saying every person that is in a charismatic church is clearly not worshiping. Like
Hmm.
I don't question whether people are worshiping, but it's just I think it's important to have the conversation. What I've told people is, at the very least, it's important to, like, I think a great question for people to ask is ask the leaders in your church how they choose the songs that you sing. Like, who chooses those? How do they choose those? And what's the process for being on the worship team? Just things like that. Things that really have those questions have nothing to do with the form of worship, but
Right.
it's just a matter of how is it viewed. So I think that's something that people people should look into, within their church, whatever form or whatever the tradition of the worship is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So quick sidebar here. A friend of mine, Nicole Park, she's on TikTok now too. She said, "Hey John, enjoy your TikToks."
Oh, that's awesome. That's always so, like, yeah, again, it all ties to, like, the insecurity thing. Like, whenever I have people that have reached out and said, "Hey, thanks for this," or whatever, there's always a sense that's just like, "What?" Like, no.
Yeah.
Like, no, there's no way so I greatly appreciate it. I think that's always such a cool thing when people go out of their way to say nice things. So thank you.
Yeah. So have you I wanted to ask you this. I was actually trying to think of this question. I wish I would have asked it earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it now. So were you born, or not born in, but like when you got saved at 5, was it in the Presbyterian tradition, or did you find yourself gravitating toward Presbyterian?
Yeah, so the church that I'm in now, that I almost hate saying this because it definitely leads to, like, this guy was just brainwashed. Like, the church that I'm in now is the same one that I was baptized in, that I grew up in. Um, but I would also say it's not for a lack of looking into and studying other denominations and things like that. And for sure, like, I think for sure, I think anyone that grows up in a church, it's really easy to go, oh yeah, this makes sense why this is right. Um, I would also say, there are things within my denomination that I maybe not necessarily theologically, but you know, different traditions and things that I'm not a huge fan of. Um, and also, again, it's like it's weird how sometimes you find yourself going, I don't know if this is something that I should be doing because of these reasons. And
Mhm.
when you list the reasons, you go, oh, this is why I should be doing this. And so I even view like being an elder in my church. I'm not like I think at the time I was the youngest guy to become an elder in our church. I am not even close to stereotypical PCA elder. Um, but I think that's really good. Like I think that's an important thing to, again, just to be like, yep, this is just it's different, and I'm able to do this, but maybe not in the way that it's been done before. Um, so yeah, I grew up in the tradition. I you know it's something that I've studied, and makes it makes sense to me. So, but yeah, I outside of a couple years in Ohio as a youth pastor, this is where I've been.
I was going to ask if, because I know you've been a youth pastor and now you're an elder, but have you done any adult ministry in the in between, or are you currently doing any adult ministry?
Not in any official capacity, I guess you would say. Like but like I've taught Sunday school.
Mhm.
I've led small groups, um, things like that. For our church, we have what we call a shepherding list. So for each elder has uh, people within the congregation that they're kind of checking up on and checking in with. So things like that. So the closest thing that I've come to with that has probably been teaching Sunday school.
Mhm.
Which has been great, but I haven't been in any official capacity as a like with adults in ministry.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so what was I going to ask? Uh, man, I had a question. It was right there. Man, I feel like I'm all over the place tonight.
It's all good.
Oh, this one's kind of a goofy question, but
Sure.
um, are you a 5 point Calvinist?
I am, yeah, which I know is like,
Heresy.
I've yeah, I've seen a couple guys on because there's been a trend going around on TikTok that was like, um, it was something about uh, basically something maybe it was something about you that people shouldn't know or that whatever, but it was just kind of a running joke that like yeah like I'm reformed, like try to keep it down, don't tell anyone,
Yeah,
because it is something that like man that really really triggers people, which is I guess there's part of me that goes I'm super happy that that's something that people are passionate about.
yeah.
Like if you're passionate about what you believe in within your faith, that's great. So I am the question that I ask. Not that I want to open up a whole can of worms with this, but the question that I kind of ask with that in terms of, um, I'm always trying to simplify things. The question that I always ask with that in terms of kind of the 5 point Calvinist things like that is, has do you believe that God has ever been surprised by anything?
Hmm.
Has
Hmm.
he ever been surprised by anything? And I think that the way that you answer that kind of goes into all of those different avenues, and so I'm a big fan of kind of going down to the logical conclusion of things, and so when you start there, each kind of road you go down, that it's kind of a good way to start, and for me a lot of it comes back to that question. So I am, it's something that I'm, in all honesty, I'm still kind of still learning and
Hmm.
still not necessarily learning, but figuring out how to articulate,
Yeah.
how to articulate it, because it really is like that's some heavy duty stuff that you can get into with
Oh
that,
yeah.
and
Oh
stuff
yeah.
that's really difficult. Like it's nothing. There's no part of me that's like, yeah, totally. It's totally simple, and here's all you need. It's something that takes some time to really look into. But again, it's something that I would say if that's not something that people have looked into, then you should. And I don't say that as like you're going to figure out that you're on my side, but like
Yeah.
at the very but being able to figure out not only what you believe, but why you believe it, and to be
Hmm.
able to articulate that, I think is really good. So, um, yeah, but that can go so many different places. And yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, if people aren't on the Christian side of TikTok, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that kind of lead back to that. So
Yeah. There's a couple of things on TikTok that I've been running into a lot lately, and I was actually gonna ask you this, but have you noticed like a resurgence in like the reform theology, or has it kind of always been there? Because I've just now noticed like a lot of it,
yeah,
and I would say that I am probably more reformed than not, but I'm definitely not a 5 point.
sure. And that's okay. I'm not, again, that's one of those things that I'm like, I'm not going to leave here and be like, I don't know if Matt's actually saved.
Oh
So
man.
um, yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think that we're starting to see the pendulum swing back a little bit,
Mm,
and it's funny because maybe from two different sides. So within within the Christian faith, I think there was a huge swing towards kind of the mega church Hillsong, um, kind of that side of things. And so you have got, and I don't want to. There are things that these guys have done that I think have been good, but
yeah.
you have like the Stephen Furticks and these kind of larger than life personalities that have been put on this pedestal, and I think that people have kind of gone out there and went, I don't think this is it. Like
Yeah.
I don't think that the whole like this is what makes me feel good. This is, which is funny because that's what the church preaches against in terms of the world, like not just going out and doing what makes you feel good, but we also get trapped in that within the church too. And so I think that there are some people that are starting to ask some more questions in terms of, well, make this make sense. Like, I know this sounds good, but does this make sense? And so looking into it from that direction, from outside the church, and I don't know if you run into this on TikTok at all, but there are a lot of people coming in from like the new age, like whether it's like witchcraft or just kind of that whole thing, where it's kind of a similar thing outside the church where people are going, I believe that there's a spiritual side to things, but I don't know that I want this God. Like I don't know if this God really appeals to me. So they go out and kind of check these things out, but again, getting to a point of going, this doesn't make sense. Like
Yeah.
this, and so I think we're seeing the pendulum swing back a little bit to at the very least, people wanting to know why. So like, yes, I believe, so I believe in a that there's a spiritual side to things, or I believe that there's a God. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And so I mean, there's along with that, people coming back to the reformed side of things, there's also a huge like reformed and Catholic thing going on TikTok right now too, which has been really interesting to watch. I haven't really, I did, I did not dive into that yet, and
I
I don't
haven't
know that I will.
I haven't hit that one yet. But the reason I ask is because sometimes I'm wondering, like, is it just the algorithm that I'm hitting, or is it an actual resurgence or not? You know?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. Again, like obviously, I'm seeing a bunch of stuff from based on things that I'm interacting with. So yeah, and all of that to say, I also know that there's a whole other side to even Christian TikTok that that is like I don't even remember what it's called, but it was like it's one of the houses. Like so it's like a praise house or whatever, that is
Oh,
very much like Gen Z type thing, which at the very least, I don't understand.
yeah.
Um, but so I know that there's that stuff out there too. So, but again, it's like I I don't want to, I can't say that I'm disappointed that there are people that are talking about their faith. Like
Mhm.
at the very least, I think we're able to kind of learn from each other that way. And so, yeah, so I think I guess I can say I've been surprised by the amount of reformed, and I'll even use that term loosely. I'm not even saying like hardcore
Yeah.
reform, but I would say I've been surprised with the amount of reformed creators that I've come
Mhm.
across and been able to interact with. I did not think it would be as many as I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of I think the reason I've been running into the reformed crowd a lot lately is because I've been studying more about dominion theology and postmillennialism,
Sure.
and also too conditional immortality. I don't know if you are familiar with that.
I don't think I am. I'll have to look
So
into that.
yeah, so the idea of conditional immortality is kind of the question of hell. Is
Oh,
it
okay.
is it eternal conscious torment, or um, is immortality truly conditional?
Hmm.
And so those who accept Jesus have that immortality, and so those who are resurrected, during the judgment, those who are resurrected and judged to be cast into the lake of fire, it's like they're burnt up, like things that
Oh, that
are
okay. So
so
is that
annihilationism,
yeah,
basically.
okay. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I have there was actually a podcast that I listened to. It was a few years ago now that they mentioned that and they were talking about it and I was like, "Huh." Like I had never even, heard of that. So that is something actually something that I've thought a lot about. Um and uh
but
and
I
so
mean,
I
yeah,
think it's a really interesting thing. I do think it's a really interesting thought.
yeah, and of course we'll all find out, at the
Right.
end. But I'm finding that a lot of that kind of stuff is it's one of those minor issues, that doesn't necessarily separate us from, like, oh well, they're not a Christian or not, but it is
Right.
one of those things that really does shape the way that you uh practice your faith.
Sure.
Especially the idea for me, especially the post millennial idea has really driven me toward a totally different way that I think about the way that
Mm,
we should be spreading the gospel.
mm.
And so yeah, but those things, I seem to hear them more from the reform side than I do from any other side. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, and I will be completely honest in saying like the end times and all of that stuff is probably stuff that I've looked into the least.
yeah,
Because in my mind it has been something where I just think um I don't know. For me I've never thought of it as something of like this is this is something that's gonna affect my day to day.
yeah,
And so I've always really thought about it as like, well, something's gonna happen,
hmm,
and that's pretty much it. So, but again, I do think it's something that even I would say that I need to look at more. And again, it's something that I think people should look into, like it, and especially for Christians. I think it's so important. There are two things along with that. So whether you're talking about the end times or whatever, the importance of understanding that it's okay to say I don't know.
right,
So you don't always have to have a question, but also understanding that if every question someone asks you, you're saying I don't know,
yeah,
that's not good.
right,
Like you should have some sort of, it's what Peter talks about. Like you should always
mhm,
be ready to give a reason, and so I do think it's something that people should be looking into. So for me, it's cool to hear you say that, like to hear you say that that's something that really does form kind of the way that you view things. I think that's awesome because I think
yeah,
we all I think there are different things for all of us that kind of trigger that,
hmm,
that really makes you look at what you're doing day to day and
hmm,
what's affecting that. So I think that's really cool.
yeah, yeah. I would definitely encourage anybody. Nicole was just mentioning that she um, has been studying post millennialism too. But what you were talking about reminded me of one of my college professors. He was saying that he was because we were asking him one day, "Are you a premillennial dispensationalist, or are you?" And he goes, "I'm a pan millennialist. It'll all pan out." in the end.
Right.
But actually brought that up to a buddy of mine, and he was like, yeah, that's lazy.
Yeah,
He's like,
for
that's
sure.
lazy eschatology.
And I'll also tell you that that's something that for me kind of triggers like again being in the denomination I'm in, it's very academic,
Yeah,
and and so there have been even like Sunday school classes that I've been in that have just gone completely off the rails because people get caught up in that conversation, and so it turns from something that's like, oh, everyone should at least know what they believe about this to like this is what you have to believe, and if you don't believe, and it's
yeah,
like, and so I think for me sometimes that kind of triggers that where I'm like, I don't want to get into that. So
yeah,
there's a little bit of background to that too.
yeah. Especially when there's a lot of views that are very speculative, you know.
Mhm.
Which is another reason why I think I lean more to the preterist post millennial kind of view,
Mm.
because it's not very speculative. It's like, hey, this stuff you can find in history. But
Right.
anyways, if you want a good material, like so I'm reading a book now. You can actually It's actually free. You can find it free online if you want a link or anything like that. Just let me know. But
Sure.
the book is called Paradise Lost by David Chilton.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I know of it. I
Paradise
have not read it.
Paradise Restored, not Paradise Lost.
Restored.
Paradise
Okay.
Restored
Got you.
by David Chilton, and he basically is helping weave these themes, the theme of paradise being restored, and that's what the whole book of Revelation is about. And so it
Right.
clears up a lot of Revelation because a lot of people put you know end time prophecies, and you have all these like John Hagee and
Yeah.
um, those kind of guys that are they put a lot of emphasis, and I think that's why I think it does put a lot of emphasis on the outlook of your faith, because the post millennial view is you know um, the church is the yeast that's in the
Yeah.
dough and it's spreading,
Right.
where the premillennial view is like, hey, um, the antichrist is coming, everybody's gonna have
Yeah.
don't take the vaccine.
I may have even saved the video to like do edit or something, but there was a guy that was like, what would really help all of like the end times people if they didn't say that this was the end times every time something happened,
Yeah,
and like I think, and so I've always, that's something I've always said, just with like even with conspiracy theorists, like it would really help your cause if you came out just once and said, nope, I think this just happened. Like I
yeah.
don't think there was anything behind this. So yeah, I do get tired. I tire of that too, where like everything that happens is like, and it's again, especially on social media or TikTok, where it's like so clearly just trying to get views, just trying to get, like
Yeah,
that. It's really all that it is. So
yeah.
yeah, I've run into some of that.
Yeah, there's one guy on there, and I don't know if you are follow him or whatnot, but he has a whiteboard. Michael something, Michael something, but
Okay.
he has a whiteboard, and he always has like a ton of stuff on it, and he like screams. He's like screaming whatever he's talking about. And there was one video he did. He did like a series of videos about peculiar people or particular people,
Mm.
and he just kept talking about it, and I was like, what is this? Like, it's not an easy teaching. Like, I don't understand how you can get this from the Bible just
Yeah.
by reading it, and
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big things is for me is like, if I'm not a scholar or something like that, how am I going to get this without you injecting it into
Well,
my view?
and so that's perfect. Because I think that comes back to, I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier, but it for me again, like looking at things and going, okay, our faith is like my faith is a big deal, and I want that to be true for everyone. I want their faith to be a big deal. At the same time, I want it like at its core, it's simple. Like it's a simple truth, and so there are a lot of things that I think because people want to use big words that they've learned, it becomes something that people can look at and go, people outside can go, I'm never going to understand this.
Yeah,
Like I'm never gonna get this. I'm never, and so I think it's important to go. that can be out there, like, and I think it's important to talk about it and to interact with, but at the same time, like, I think that we should be putting simple truths out there that people
Yeah.
can connect with. And so that really is kind of my goal with that is, I'm going to say some things that people don't necessarily agree with, um, but I also want it all to come back to the simple truth, not the simple not the simple life, not the
Yeah.
simple living out, but the simple truth of this is what the gospel is, and I want to try to point back to that as much as I can. So yeah, what you said just kind of triggered that for me of just like, yeah, let's not make it what it's not.
Right.
um
And I think
yeah,
I think we get away from that a lot. I think we get away from just the simple gospel, um, because we want to do, like, as Christians, in coming from a charismatic, being a part of the charismatic church for a while now. We have all these different ministries and things that do all these different things. And it's kind of like, when are we preaching the gospel
right,
in this? When are we preaching just the simple gospel that Jesus came, died for our sins so that we
yeah.
could be a part of the family of Abraham?
Well, and you see one of the really cool things that happened in this last maybe year and a half is I was teaching I was actually teaching the youth class, but it was church history. And so
Mm.
it was starting with the apostles, after the ascension of Christ, and really moving through like up until really almost today. We didn't get to finish it because COVID. But something that kind of came up that I've thought about within Christianity today, but I realized it was throughout history, was there would be these great figures within Christianity, and no joke, like, without fail, it would basically be, this is something great that they did or said, this is a great way that they led people, and then eventually they said or did something really stupid.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, but a lot of it seems to come back to, and you see it within Christianity today. Like,
Yeah.
we put people up on this pedestal,
Mm.
and I think that there's a pressure. Rob Bell is a great example of this. So
Yeah.
I think when you are in the business of putting out Christian content, I think that there's a point in which you feel like that you have to come up with something new. Like, it can't just be the simple thing anymore, because people are constantly coming to you to go, teach us something else, teach us something else. And so you have Rob Bell, who did those. I don't know if you had those Numa videos growing
Yeah. I
up.
still I still got I
They're
still got a
so
stack of
they're
them.
so good. Like,
Yeah.
they're, and it was one of those questions that I had to go, can we still show these? Because I don't, because
Yeah.
then because he came out with a book that basically said, like, hell doesn't exist,
Yeah.
like in any form,
Uh-huh.
and so, and I think, I don't know how deep we want to go with this, but I think all of that really is connected to just a sense of community. Like,
Mm.
when people become celebrities, they are not a part of a community anymore. They Because people, and a lot of times for good reasons, because
Yeah.
people are wanting to take advantage, or they're wanting to be around them for the wrong reasons. But you see this even with guys like Lecrae, or
Mhm.
Andy Mineo, where they've came right out and said, like, I was really struggling, like, to the point that I was questioning things that I believed, because of this. And so I think all of that is wrapped up in the, don't get away from what it is. Like, don't, we can talk about the end times, we can talk about baptism, we can talk about worship, and it's important to know what you believe with those things, but don't let that distract you from what this is. And you see that, I think the progressive Christianity movement is a great example of that, where it's like,
Mhm.
what, we could just turn this into whatever we want it to be.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the danger of straying from, the more that you try to inject yourself into the gospel, the more diluted it's going to get.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree. Well, man, it is 10 o'clock, and I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I am gonna ask if you could just stick around, kind of do a post show thing like we did last time.
Sure.
But I definitely appreciate, if you want to plug anything, now's the time to go ahead and do it. Um,
Sure. I mean, I'm semi-quarantined with 4 kids right now, so the really the only thing I have going on is TikTok. John the Messenger on there. I'm trying to get back into Instagram too, which I'm realizing I can do kind of more personal stuff on there. So it's also John the Messenger. It's just missing the second E because I couldn't fit the entire thing into the but it's linked on my TikTok too. So those are the two big things. And I said before, on the outside chance you're within driving distance of Western Pennsylvania and you're looking for a retreat speaker or anything like that, then I'm always looking for that kind of stuff too. So but yeah, this is great. I mean, I love doing this kind of stuff. So I appreciate you having me on again, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, I've actually thought about doing like a book club. Like, hey, we pick a book and then like we just come at the end, like read the whole book, come at the end of the reading of the book and be like, hey, what'd you think about this? Is it heresy? Is it not?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah.
All right. All right, man. So stick around and we'll do like a little after show thing. All right, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed this this episode. You can rewatch this stream on my YouTube page. The link is in the bio, or you can listen on podcast available on Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. The episode I did previously with John is probably never going to be available. It's going to be a lost episode. Maybe it'll resurface in 2,000 years or so, and you can listen to it then. But this episode will definitely be available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and I hope to see you guys next time as we explore more Matt News.